everyone. I'm Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, here for Friday Find. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you're having a great week. TGIF, it's almost the weekend, and here we are with another week of space news that I'd love to share. So why don't we dive in right away? Love seeing your comments, by the way, in the chat there. I see folks from where we've got folks from Turkey, North Carolina, Minnesota. Fantastic. I love to see where you're watching from. Well, let's just dive in of the things that I come across as an astronomy journalist that catch my eye in my inbox, things that I get that are just fascinating new discoveries in the astronomical world. So the first one that caught my eye was this press release, and I'm going to share this with you guys because I love to do that. You know, you do your own reading at your leisure, but basically I'm just pointing you to this particular. It's NASA may have landed on a Martian mega tsunami deposit nearly 50 years ago. So what are we talking about here? We got to go back in time to the 1970s when NASA's Viking 1 lander touched down on the surface of Mars. Its cameras, if you remember, imaged a boulder-strewn surface that was kind of mysterious in its origins. But now, 50 years later, a senior scientist named Alexis Rodriguez at the Planetary Science Institute, this is in Arizona, and they think that the landing site where Viking 1 touched down on was really on the edge of a deposit left behind by a gigantic tsunami that formed when a 3-kilometer wide asteroid impacted the northern Martian Ocean that existed at the time. There was water, a large body of water on the surface of Mars. They were talking 3.4 billion years ago. What's interesting that they point out in this press release, there's a quote here where it says, the lander was designed to seek evidence of extant life on Mars. Extant meaning current life, that it may be existing currently alive right now on Mars. This was 50 years ago. That's what Viking 1 was supposed to do. So they selected a suitable landing site that at the time that faced arduous task of using some of the planet's earliest acquired images, accompanied by Earth-based radar probing of the planet's surface. That's how they chose the site. In addition to meeting tight engineering constraints on the spacecraft's orbital and descent paths, the landing site selected needed to fulfill a critical requirement: the presence of extensive evidence of former surface water. So this was back in July 1976, where they landed the spacecraft. And let me see if they have it here. You can see where the Viking 1 lander is right there. And this is where, by the way, the Pathfinder rover was, that little spot right there. They think this was on the edge of where a tsunami washed over, at least to the edge where the deposits were left behind. This is kind of a quick view of what it looked like, where, as a reminder, those of you that are around back in 1976, you may remember this was our view from the surface of Mars. It made a lot of media attention at the time. But what's interesting is they really didn't know at the time where they had landed, what they were actually seeing. But this area was filled with water, and we think that there was actually a huge wave, probably at least 250 meters high, they're saying, that washed over the area. This is something really interesting because it tells us that Mars was very active at the time, and a lot of the features that we're seeing currently on missions, like how the Perseverance rover is inside the bottom of a crater, may be an area, again, that was washed over by these kind of moments of chaotic, events that like an asteroid impact may do. So here is a link to the press release about this, the one that I was just pointing out here. But a mega tsunami that it may have existed on Mars over 3 billion years ago, it's really impressive that we're able to discover that. So that was something I wanted to point out to you guys. Another really interesting article, some space telescope news that I came across. Astronomers see stellar self-control in action. So this is a Chandra space telescope image. It's done in the X-rays. And what it does is it's showing us a gas cloud where young stars and older stars together are forming and coexisting. And what they've realized is that this is a star cluster, that they realized is that large stars can actually really initiate an event where it expels gas out of a star cluster to prevent new generation of stars from forming. And so it's kind of what they're calling it is a demonstration of self-control when stars are forming in groups. Here's a really neat little tour of this gas cloud. Check this out.
Visit Chandra's beautiful universe. RCW 36. Astronomers have found that groups of stars or clusters in certain environments can regulate themselves. The stars in the cluster known as RCW 36 have self-control by limiting the number of stars to grow. They do this when the biggest and brightest stars expel most of the gas from the system, which depletes the cluster of the material new stars need to grow. This process could drastically slow down the birth of new stars and give better agreement with predictions for how quickly stars should be forming in clusters. This study combines data from several telescopes, including NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, NASA's Airborne Sophia Observatory, the Apex Radio Telescope in Chile, and the European Space Agency's Herschel Telescope in space. The target of the observations was RCW 36, a large cloud of gas called an H2 region, mainly composed of hydrogen atoms that have been ionized, which means the atoms have been stripped of their electrons. This star-forming complex is located in the Milky Way, about 2,900 light-years from Earth. RCW 36 contains a cluster of young stars and two cavities, or voids, carved out of the ionized hydrogen gas, extending in opposite directions. There is also a ring of gas that wraps around the cluster in between the cavities, forming a waist around the hourglass-shaped cavities. Astronomers see hot gas with a temperature of about 2 million Kelvin, or about 3.6 million degrees Fahrenheit, radiating in X-rays with Chandra. Most of the hot gas is concentrated near the center of RCW 36, close to the two hottest and most massive stars in the cluster. Much of the rest of the hot gas is outside the cavities, after having leaked through the borders of the cavities. The Sophia and Apex data show that the ring contains cool, dense gas and is expanding at 2,000 to 4,000 miles per hour. The Sophia data also reveals that shells of cool gas on the perimeter of both cavities are expanding at about 10,000 miles per hour, likely being driven outward by pressure from the hot gas observed with Chandra. The hot gas, plus radiation from stars in the cluster, has also cleared even larger cavities around RCW 36, forming a structure like a nested Russian doll. Researchers also see evidence from the Sophia data for some cool gas around the ring being ejected from RCW 36 at even higher speeds of about 30,000 miles per hour.
So, goes on, but basically what's really cool here is that we're kind of understanding how clusters of stars form and how they evolve over time. And what this is showing us that the models that we've come up with on our computers jive with what we're seeing now with this new evidence with this one particular cluster called RCW 36. So it's really interesting that we come up with models on our computers of how stars are born, how they live, how they die, how they are formed in groups, and then what happens to them over time. You have to remember, our own sun was born in a cloud of gas and dust with many other probably siblings, and they've all scattered over time. But we see bits and pieces of things like this happening across the sky. So if I turn to I can show you on let me see, on my planetarium program. Let me see if I can do that like that. You can see, this is like the sky that you can see tonight. Okay, this is Friday, December 2nd. And if we wait until it gets a little bit darker, let me just make it, let's say, a couple of hours after sunset, you'll see a cluster. Not the same one we're talking about in this press release, but something similar in that it's a young cluster of stars, about 100 million years old. And it's in Taurus, the bull. You can find that constellation rising in the east, and you'll see a bright orange, very bright orange star. Next to it is another bright star, but a bit fainter, and above it, forming kind of a right-angled triangle, is a cluster, a star cluster called the Pleiades. It's about 444 light years away, and it contains 7 super bright stars that you can see with a very keen eye. If you have really good eyesight, you could probably make out those individual stars in this cluster. It's 444 light years away. It looks like, to many people have likened the shape of this cluster as like a miniature version of the Little Dipper. And this is 444 light years away. It's actually one of the closest clusters to Earth, and you can see it with the naked eye. And what's interesting is that these stars that are part of this cluster will eventually kind of float away from each other over time as they mature. And what this new this new press release is telling us, this new discovery, is that we're kind of understanding that if you have larger stars in clusters that are larger than some of the other ones, they actually can impact the future of the entire cluster by pushing out gas and dust that would otherwise be used to create next generation of young stars in that cluster. So really, really interesting stuff of understanding star clusters and how they evolve. Another very interesting thing that came across my inbox quickly is the Webb Space Telescope, Keck telescope as well, that's in Hawaii, one of the largest telescopes in the world, team up to study Saturn's moon Titan. This is a press release. I'm going to just pop that into the chat for you guys so you can look that up yourself. There's the press release, and they've created this really cool image of the moon Titan of Saturn. This is one of the moons of Saturn. We've seen it up close, of course, with the Cassini mission, but it's amazing how powerful the Keck is here on the ground. There's a picture of it right there. And, of course, the James Webb Space Telescope, both of them teaming up to create this composite image showing us even cloud patterns, clouds in the atmosphere of this small moon on a planet that's over 1 billion kilometers away. It's absolutely incredible, the power of of our telescopes now. Here's a beautiful image taken on November 7th this year, so just over almost a month ago, showing bright clouds in the northern hemisphere at 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock. There's a little cloud right there, and there at 1 o'clock. At 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, you can see those two cloud systems right there. Imagine, these are telescopes that are peering over 1 billion kilometers in distance to see this kind of, atmospheric detail. Just incredible. So check that out. And of course, if you want to see Saturn for yourself, guess what? Saturn is right now visible in the night sky. It is in a lineup with the moon, Jupiter, and Saturn. They're almost in a nice lineup in this evening sky. Look towards the south. You'll see that gibbous moon. Then you have Jupiter, which is the brightest object after the moon in the evening sky. And then Saturn is way off to the right there. This is visible right around the world. So wherever you're watching, this is something you can see tonight, Friday night, once it gets dark, in the overnight period as well. And again, if you get clouded out today, Saturday, this is the view from Saturday, and Sunday, this is the view. So you'll still see that beautiful lineup all weekend long. And there is Saturn. And if you have a telescope and you zoom in on Saturn, you can see the rings of Saturn very, very clearly visible. And you can even see some of the moons of Saturn at some point as well. Like these, I don't know if these are those, but no, these are stars. But some of them can be visible. Some of like Titan can be one of the moons that are visible of Saturn. And you just need a small backyard telescope to check that out. So really, really cool stuff. Again, visible. And I've put the press release in the comment section for you. And just take a read. It's really interesting to see the power that we have with our current space telescopes working in combination with the telescopes on the ground. It's just fantastic stuff. I always love sharing these amazing news that are coming across my desk. I hope you enjoy it. Tune in on Monday when we're going to be talking about the night sky for next week. And the big thing is the moon is going to be going in front of the planet Mars. You don't want to miss that. I'll have all the details on my website very shortly. So keep watching my posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. I'll be posting a viewer's guide that you don't want to miss next week, exactly when Mars is at opposition. And I'll explain all of this, what you can see. Folks right across North America, Canada, most of Europe, Northern Africa are going to be in prime time position to see the moon go in front of Mars. I'll have all the details very shortly on my website. I'll put a link up on my social posts. And of course, we'll talk more about it next week on my Monday Night Sky This Week show. So don't miss that. That's it for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in for Friday Find. I love that you've been tuning in and showing your support. And if you want to continue showing support for these videos, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channels, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or on Twitter. Please do support by subscribing to my channel. Again, thanks so much. And of course, if you're interested in any of my books like my Stargazer's Atlas or my Backyard Guide to Night Sky, I will have stocks available for signing copies, dedicating copies in a matter of a few days by middle of next week. By 6th or 7th of December, I should have them in stock. Stay tuned for details on how you can purchase your copies for the holidays. Maybe it makes a great gift. Anyways, thanks so much for your support. I hope to see you guys next week. And until then, I wish all of you clear skies. Bye-bye.